They came up with bogus straw men arguments against it, did politicking and story planting in the press, and I eventually realized that there was a rotten game going on.
Could you give a bit more about the motivation why someone would want to be destructive of good news?
Well, they were very fearful. They realized that it was real and then tried to suppress it.
He died as soon as he began to speak. Back in 1989, the world came within inches of changing forever. A discovery so dangerous to those in power, it was buried the moment it appeared. When he started exposing what he had been warned never to reveal, it didn't take long before he was found murdered in Connecticut.
The first assault was by planting negative stories in the press, and people at MIT, I regret to say, were the first people to promote the idea that this was fraud.
We found a rare recording of his testimony. It was recorded on April 23, 1998. It's raw, unpolished, and unsettling. His words are too important to filter or reinterpret, so you hear them exactly as he said them. Listen carefully.
So there was a compulsion by the Secretary of Energy in the new Bush administration to get to the bottom of this. And so I had to tell the press what the status was, and I had to ask them. I had to find spokespeople. There became, I must say, one very positive person toward very quickly at MIT, whose name was Professor Peter Hagelstein in electrical engineering. And when he came out with that theory at MIT, there was hell to pay, and he has paid a very big price.
Back in 1989, the world came within inches of changing forever. A discovery so powerful, it was buried before it could spread. And today, we're facing a new kind of revolution. Only this time, it's in plain sight. Artificial intelligence. On March 23, 1989, the unthinkable happened. At the University of Utah, two respected chemists stood before cameras and announced they had split the atom, not in a reactor, but in a glass jar. Heavy water, palladium, and a trickle of current, producing more energy than it consumed. If real, it meant infinite, clean power from ordinary water. For a brief moment, the world believed the future had arrived, but almost as quickly, the miracle of the century was branded the joke of the decade.
What happened was that on March 23rd, 1989, something caught us all by surprise. In the afternoon, there was an announcement by Drs. Martin Fleischmann and Stanley Pons at the University of Utah, stating that they had performed what appeared to be some type of nuclear process in a small vessel, jar, test tube, as it were, of heavy water with palladium. More heat was coming out, they said, than could possibly be accounted for by the electricity going in and any known chemical reactions.
Even when the laughter died down, one man refused to move on. Eugene Mallove, an engineer with degrees from MIT and Harvard. Unlike many of his colleagues, Mallove didn't dismiss the Utah team outright. He had seen too much to believe the story was over. And when internal data from MIT's own replication experiments crossed his desk, he noticed something disturbing. The early draft charts showed signs of excess heat in heavy water experiments, exactly what Pons and Fleischmann had claimed. But in the final version, the curves looked different. The upward trace of energy had been pushed downward, flattening out the evidence. To Mallove, it was not an accident. It was a deliberate adjustment designed to erase a positive signal. Mallove knew what he had seen, and by speaking out, he crossed a line few dared to cross. Years later, he would pay the ultimate price.
On July 10th, the data that was in the MIT draft report, as made by one individual on the team of 16, showed excess heat, on the graph at least, the semi-processed raw data, you might say. There it was, excess heat in the heavy water experiment, no excess heat in the light water experiment. Now, and then there was text for that report, for that section of the report, the calorimetry part of the report, which they had very much de-emphasized because they weren't interested in that really. 3 days later, I had the comparison, what went into the final report, and which was published by the Journal of Fusion Energy, and was widely touted, and the conclusion was in the DOE report. They had kept the light water experiment, the control experiment, they had done the appropriate time averaging in hour. They had averaged over each hour and made 1 point. That was okay. So what you saw in the control experiment case where there was no excess heat, you saw it get averaged, and you saw the curve, and you could overlay them, and this one could be, this new curve, which was to be published, you could see how it was legitimately the reflection of the earlier unaveraged raw data, okay? But in the case of the heavy water situation, these curves were utterly unlike one another. One had been radically shifted downward, and it turned out later that that was even worse than I thought. I thought they had just taken the whole data and just shifted it down, and I searched for a reason why that would have been done, and there was no reason. I did some detective work behind the scenes to find out if there was a legitimate reason. There was no legitimate reason, and there never has been and never will be, and furthermore, it has been analyzed by others in a more sophisticated way than the analysis I applied, and they found out that there was absolutely no way whatsoever of taking the data from the preliminary July 10th version and going to the July 13th version, which was 89, which was published, and ever coming up with that by what is called a linear transformation. It had to be highly manipulated. And in other fields, we would call that fraud. And I state that it was fraud.
This was no trivial slip. MIT's published report became one of the most influential documents used to discredit cold fusion around the world. According to Mallove, those altered graphs gave skeptics the ammunition they needed to declare the field dead. If the nation's top technical university couldn't reproduce the results, then clearly the whole thing was nonsense. Or so the narrative went. But Mallove insisted the truth was far messier. He called it what no one else dared to: fraud.
And furthermore, in the entire bigger picture, forgetting now for the moment just that curve shifting, which is fraud, okay? The big picture is that they used their conclusions, which were totally inappropriate, to continue the charade to 1998 and onward, that there's nothing to cold fusion. The big university MIT and its experts concluded that it was nonsense. That's the worst fraud. But if someone wants to get the real smoking gun and say, did they ever do an experiment that looked like it might be promising, they were duty-bound to publish that experiment and say if they wanted, okay, here are the error bars that show the errors we might have made there. And so we look at that curve and we say that it really doesn't prove what Pons and Fleischmann was doing. In fact, they also wrote in the language there, and they changed the language from July 10th through July 13th and showed that they were matching their negative conclusion to the shifting of the data. I would not have objected if they had just showed the data and said, we don't think that means it's cold fusion, and it's not. But I think most people would then have looked at the data and would have said, how can you say there's nothing here? You've only done one experiment for 80 hours in a comparison test. You better go back and do that again. The lower echelon fellow at MIT, under no circumstances, would have presented to his boss, Ronald Parker, the shocking news that MIT was going to be forced to present a nominally positive result. He just couldn't do it. He couldn't bring himself to do it. He didn't have the integrity to do it. Had he the integrity to do it, the whole story would have been different.
They massaged the data, and in doing so, they rewrote history. But the graphs were only the beginning. What started in the basement of one university was about to reach the halls of government, where the final blow would be struck. By the summer of 1989, the excitement that once surrounded cold fusion had turned into a firestorm of controversy. The US Department of Energy stepped in, forming a special panel of experts to give an official verdict. Scientists across the world waited anxiously. If the panel found the claims credible, billions could be redirected into a new line of research that promised unlimited energy. But if they ruled against it, the story would be over before it truly began. And the result came swiftly. By July, just a few short months after the Utah press conference, the panel declared there was insufficient evidence to support cold fusion. It was a death sentence written in bureaucratic language. With that single decision, government funding dried up. Universities that had been curious shut their doors. Promising researchers abandoned the field, fearing the label of pseudoscience. Patents tied to cold fusion were quietly rejected or stalled in the system. Those who dared to believe suddenly found themselves blacklisted, ridiculed, and without resources. For the establishment, it was easier to declare the matter finished than to risk undermining existing programs in hot fusion, which already commanded billions in funding, or to threaten the global energy economy built on oil.
We are not talking about a small issue here. This is not whether some obscure theory is right or wrong, and then this group is right and that group is wrong about how to theorize about something. This is the very lifeblood of civilization. This is energy. Thousands of children die every week or every day because they do not have clean water. And these small compact energy sources, just as an example, could save their lives, okay? And we do not have that now. If the government had done the right thing and had at least been neutral about this, and had, instead of MIT hot fusioneers and propagandists, if they had not insisted on killing it to save their own funding, and they make large salaries. One in particular, they're the head of the hot fusion lab at the time. He now makes $500,000 a year, his house allowance plus his very high salary. What would have happened is that science would have proceeded in a reasonable way.
Now, it wasn't about the truth anymore. It was about protecting billion-dollar hot fusion budgets, political prestige, and the profits of fossil fuel empires. And when so much money and power are at stake, the knives always come out. But the real tragedy wasn't in Washington. It was in the world outside the lab. Mallove said what was buried in 1989 could have saved countless lives had it been pursued with honesty and urgency. Imagine small, affordable power units bringing electricity to villages with no grid, purifying drinking water where children die daily from contamination, and replacing the burning of fossil fuels that choke the atmosphere. According to Mallove, this wasn't just a scientific controversy, it was a lost opportunity that stretched across decades. Instead of developing a clean, virtually limitless energy source, humanity stayed locked in the same cycle of oil dependence, pollution, and energy poverty. While governments funneled billions into hot fusion machines that still can't break even after half a century, cold fusion research was left to wither on the margins, dismissed as fantasy. Mallove believed that this delay cost millions of lives that could have been extended with cheap electricity, safe drinking water, and modern healthcare powered by abundant energy.
But frankly, the worst consequence for them, if they look themselves in the mirror, once all this technology is out and we're running, non-fossil fuel sources, non-conventional fission sources, they will have to look themselves in the face and in the mirror and say, look what I did. I delayed a technology for many years. And that's why I think this is a very serious matter. This is not a game. This is not an academic exercise. This is life and death. And this is, above all, for the world, hope that was killed, or temporarily killed, in 1989. All right? The world needs a large dose of hope for many reasons. You know, there's a lot of concern about the environment. And to have participated in a conspiracy, a public conspiracy, not a smoke-filled room conspiracy, a publicly acknowledged conspiracy almost, out in the open kind of conspiracy to kill an idea, and not an idea, but a real technology as we now see, as commercial developments are occurring, is a disgraceful thing. Millions of people, in effect, have needlessly died. We will never get back the 9 years or so, or however you want to rate it, when it should have been taken seriously. All that time is gone and will never come back again. So whenever these devices are developed and used, that period of time of delay, which is on the order of 9 years, you could argue maybe 7 years, it's gone and won't come back.
His words were blunt. Millions died because it was suppressed. Even if you don't fully accept his numbers, the scale of what might have been lost is impossible to ignore. He didn't just warn the world, he lived the consequences of exposing it. Not long after making these claims public, he was found murdered in Connecticut. Because if there was even a fraction of truth in those early experiments, then the suppression of cold fusion wasn't just a mistake. It was one of the greatest crimes against humanity ever committed. They thought the verdict was final, but the truth has a way of clawing back from the grave, and in hidden labs across the world, the silence began to crack. Even after the US government and major universities declared cold fusion dead, not everyone walked away. In Japan, Italy, and a handful of smaller labs across the world, researchers quietly kept experimenting. They reported flashes of strange results, bursts of excess heat, unexplained energy outputs, and in some cases, signs of actual nuclear changes happening inside their devices. These were not the headlines of 1989, but scattered reports that suggested something important was still hiding in the data. One of the most intriguing threads came from Japan. At Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, a physicist named Yoshiaki Iwamura and his team pushed deuterium through palladium layered with other metals. To their surprise, they claimed to see elements shift, atoms apparently transforming into new elements. To mainstream science, it sounded impossible. But the experiments were repeated and observed, showing consistent patterns that demanded attention. These results hinted at processes that classical physics could not yet explain. In 2004, the Department of Energy revisited the subject. The official line was still skeptical, but this time the report acknowledged that there were anomalies worth testing. It was not an endorsement, but it was a crack in the wall that had been built in 1989.
Has already been exhibited in their experiments to evolve more than 1,000 times the chemical energy if you just burn that hydrogen. So even though today conventional hydrogen energy is the good thing, you have to make it somehow with energy. But what Randall Mills is saying at the Blacklight Power Corporation is that if we use this process that they've developed and patented in Australia, we can get 1,000 times the energy out of ordinary hydrogen, which means fill up your car with a tank full of water, 20 gallons of water or so, drive a 200 horsepower car, as he stated in our magazine, drive it at 60 miles an hour, 100,000 miles. That's what one tank full of water will do, according to his modest theory. According to cold fusion theory, a relatively smaller amount of water, not even a 20-gallon tank, appropriate kind of water and what have you, might drive the car millions of miles. So we're talking about a powerful agent of change here.
1989 was the year hope was buried, sealed away under ridicule and denial. Yet truth has a strange way of resurfacing, even when the world tries to drown it. Cold fusion remains a shadow on the edge of science, a possibility that refuses to die. So ask yourself, what if the future didn't fail, but was pushed aside? And what happens when it finally pushes back?
You still need essentially close to atomic level precision, like the atoms really need to be in the right spot. I think they're getting clean rooms wrong, by the way, in these modern fabs. I'm gonna make a bet here.
Okay.
That Tesla will have a 2 nanometer fab, and I can eat a cheeseburger and smoke a cigar in the fab.
Okay.
Oh, come on. Yes.
The air handling will be that good?
Okay. Do you have this sketched out in your mind? Like, how are the atoms being placed that they're immune to cheeseburger grease?
They just maintain wafer isolation the entire time, which is actually the default for fabs. The wafers are transported in boxes of pure nitrogen gas.
Yep.
Under a slight positive pressure.
So are the bananas at Walmart. Just so you know.
Yeah. Well, it's insecticide
reason.
essentially. Like, it's pretty hard for anything that's combusting to live without oxygen.
Yep.
So
Let's talk about...
So like you can kill the bugs just by putting a nitrogen blanket on
interesting.
plants. Yeah.
Interesting.
I want to talk about energy, health, education, because those are people's concerns. So on the energy front, the innermost loop of everything that you're building and doing right now.
Energy is the foundation.
What's your vision for energy abundance?
The sun.
In the next, this decade, the sun. Yeah, I mean, so
the sun is everything.
It's everything. So you're all in on solar. I mean, your natural gas and solar. You're at Colossus 2, right?
Yeah. People just don't understand how that solar is everything. So everything compared to the sun, all other energy sources are like cavemen throwing some twigs into a fire.
Yeah.
So the sun is over 99.8% of all mass in the solar system. Jupiter is around 0.1% of the mass. So even if you burnt Jupiter, the energy produced by the sun would still round up to 100%.
Yeah.
And then if you teleported 3 more Jupiters into our solar system and burnt them too,
It's still round up.
the sun still rounds up to 100% of energy.
Any interest in fusion? I mean, like,
Yeah,
like
the
fusion,
sun.
on, fusion on a planet, fusion on Earth.
You know what? You know
See
what's
that coming a mile away.
You're never gonna guess how the sun works.
Giant coal plants.
I mean, we have a giant free fusion reactor that shows up every day.
93 million miles away.
It's farcical for us to create little fusion reactors. I mean, that would be like, having a tiny ice cube maker in the Antarctic and say, "Hey, look, we made ice." I'm like, "Congratulations!" Even the fucking Antarctic.
So totally with you on this.
There's like 3-kilometer high glaciers right next to you.
Okay.
Yeah, but sure you can make an ice cube.
If you just narrow the question to the Memphis timeline, so Memphis data center timeline between 1 gigawatt and 10 gigawatt, you're not gonna pull 10 gigawatts out of Memphis. Maybe you are.
2 or 3.
2 or 3? Okay, so there's still a gap between there and the next whatever. You can just drop that. So and they're not in space yet at that
so
point.
we're still in Toyland here
We're
on
still in
energy.
Toyland, you said?
Toyland.
10 gigawatts. You know what's amazing is there's 100 megawatts right outside the door here, and it's massive.
Yeah.
It's enormous,
Yeah.
and it uses more energy
imagine 100 times
than everything. All these manufacturing lines combined use less energy than that.
I think,
But we're talking about
that
a
long
gigawatt.
ago. Cortex
Or 10
One
gigawatts.
was the third largest training cluster in the world
Yeah.
for doing coherent training.
You're falling behind.
Well, we have Cortex 2 that's being built out. That'll be half a gigawatt and operational middle of next year.
So going back to what Dave is saying, over the next 5 years, what are you scaling on energy front?
5 years is a long time.
I mean, energy. China's done an incredible job.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's running circles around us.
China has done an incredible job on solar.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So I believe China's production capacity is around 1,500 gigawatts per year of solar.
Yeah. They put in 500 terawatts in the last year. Terawatt hours.
Yeah.
Terawatt hours.
I was like
500 terawatt hours, to be very specific.
Yeah.
In the last year, 70% of that was solar, and they're just scaling. Do you imagine that?
Solar scales.
Do you imagine that the U.S. could make that level of investment and commitment? Because people are worried about their energy bills going up with no data centers in our backyard. How do we provide? I mean, energy is equivalent to cost of living. It's equivalent to health. It's equivalent to clean water. The higher energy production of a country, the higher its GDP. Energy is important. So what do we do to scale that way?
You were touching on AI. What you said that some people there's some misunderstandings. Can you talk about that?
Yes, and I am tired, but I always like to talk to you.
Thank you.
So yes, I think that in both AI and quantum computers, people are overhyping both the threat and the promise, and in many ways underhyping both the threat and the promise.
Okay.
And I would say also that it's even bigger for AI than it is for quantum computers. That the threat and the promise for quantum computers are cool. The threat and the promise for AI is even greater. And so it's amazing. In the midst of all this excess hype, the truth is even more maybe fundamental. It's just amazing how that all works.
Yes.
So is an AI going to become intelligent and take over the world and kill us all and be the Terminator? I don't see that right now. Is AI going to change the nature of our jobs? Yes, and faster than you think.
Okay. In what ways?
So a typical assembly line has people doing 1,000 different tasks that honestly they do better than robots. And we're going to go from robots being able to do 0 of those better than humans to all of them in a year or 2. I mean that quickly. So take the Tesla bot. It's not the only robot in the world. Right now, it is so primitive, it isn't even as good as Boston Dynamics. It shuffles along, and it is going to be vastly better in almost no time because humans don't write the programs. They have built a system that's end-to-end neural networks learning from watching. And they can learn from simulation. They can just do trial and error millions of times in a simulated world and get really good at it. And for many years in the labs, we've been doing this, where simulated reinforcement learning systems learn how to walk and learn how to do complicated tasks and learn how to use Rubik's Cubes. People have demonstrated all this. And now we have the Tesla bot. with a company that has one of the world's largest supercomputer AI training systems, and they have the software set up to do end-to-end neural networks with reinforcement learning. This primitive robot that shuffles along, can barely do anything, is going to go from doing nothing to doing everything like that.
And you're saying it's going to be able to learn by just watching?
Oh,
you just show it how to fold a shirt or build a house or whatever.
Exactly. And then it finds tunes in simulation. And then it fine-tunes by actually going out and doing it. If you have millions of them sending their information back to headquarters, they can share with each other, and each one is learning by doing and teaching all the others as it does. Oh, this is fast. This is going to do amazing things.
Wow. And so presumably then they could start teaching each other as well.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. So,
yes.
So it isn't just one teaching all the others. It's all the others teaching all the others.
Exactly. The Tesla cars are just proving the way. Each Tesla car is recording what it's doing, and all the others are learning from its experience.
How do they know? It's a bit like gossip protocol in a way.
It's a bit like gossip. It's more centralized.
Yes. But how do they know the information they're sharing is the right way to do something?
Good question. Well, I saw a situation, I did something, and it didn't crash, so I guess it was good. And you can do other things too. There are ways of having even AIs learn what good situations look like. And then you can start saying, I've watched lots of human drivers doing things, I apply these metrics to them, and the AI itself figures out which humans to learn from and which ones not to learn from. And so it's reinforcement learning.
Wow. And you believe this is going to happen in the next couple of years?
Oh, yeah. So I think the speed is going to be faster than people understand. People are worried about AGI and ASI. Yeah, okay, I'm less worried about that happening. I think it's going to happen slower than you're imagining. Computers that actually understand what they're saying, that's going to be much slower than you're thinking. A computer that can do all those little fiddly things on an assembly line, it's going to happen faster than you're thinking.
I have no idea how many people in the world are employed to do those tasks. So what are we as a planet are going to do? What are the, particularly entry-level jobs, and what are we going to do in 2 or 3 years' time when there's these robots that can do it without sleep, without unions, without toilet breaks, etc.?
I understand. So just a couple of years ago, I heard of a robot that could finally sew with cloth. And cloth is stretchy and nonlinear and very complicated. It's hard to do that. And they had then created robots that now could do what you do in a sweatshop in a less developed country. And those people are horribly mistreated in those sweatshops. But now they're going to be unemployed? Okay, yeah. That doesn't sound good either. But this is coming, and you can't stamp it out. The magic ingredients that Tesla is using, I just use them as an example.
Yeah, of course.
There's going to be 100 and then 1,000 companies doing the exact same thing. And the cat's out of the bag. The technology for it is very simple. You can't regulate it. You can't stop it. If you try to regulate it in one country, they'll just do it in some other countries. The cat's out of the bag. So the best thing we can do, as opposed to trying to put the genie back in the bottle, which is a losing battle, is to accelerate it, but then also put a lot of effort into how do we help the people that are displaced. So how do you help the people that are displaced? You do retraining programs, you do education programs, you set up programs to create new kinds of jobs. There are a million new kinds of jobs. There are people getting full-time employment making unboxing videos on YouTube.
Yeah.
What? I've never heard of that before. And now you can make a full-time job of that. Or kids who will play a video game while talking about something else, and they'll get huge followings. You can get a full-time job doing that.
But you can get, though, this problem is way bigger than that, though, isn't it? I mean, we're talking tens, if not hundreds of millions of people.
I know, but this is the tip of the iceberg of new kinds of jobs. There are people who can be life coaches for you, or can come along and be basically a friend, and they get paid for it. Well, who wants a friend? Okay, you want a huge industry? Let's talk about the demographic transition as we are aging as a planet, and we need assistive care in our old age. There will be robots that can do this. This is one of the things that Japan is investing heavily in. But okay, some antisocial people want a robot doing it, but how many people want an actual human to be there with them? The demand is enormous. And do you have to have a PhD to be the person that holds your hands when you're sick and you're old? You do not. You need to be a human being. So these displaced people can do that. So like every revolution in history where 99% of the jobs go away, we create 90% of the jobs. The fear for me is not that, it's how fast it's happening. That's the danger. So in 1900, 97% of us were farmers, and 100 years later, 3% of us were farmers. Do we have 94% unemployment? Of course not. We all got retrained into new jobs. And most of us work in jobs that couldn't have even been imagined in 1900. So this will happen again. But it's not going to happen over a century. It's going to happen over a decade.
It's the transition.
It's the transition.
That's the problem.
Speed of the transition.
Yes.
So what we need to be doing is putting real effort into creating organizations to help people through that transition. Also, basic education is very important. In a lot of the world, learning English is a life changer. So maybe we should be helping them do that. In a lot of the world, basic literacy is a game changer. So we should be helping them do that. In a lot of the world, being trained to be able to work with people in service where you're working with people, like helping the elderly or taking your your order at a fast food place.
Yeah.
Robots are going to do all the cooking behind the scenes. That's going away. Those jobs are going away. But the person at the counter is not going to go away because people want people.
Yes.
Even for
now.
No.
Well,
people inherently. Okay.
I mean, you see the self-service checkout things at the supermarket. People are making, that was alien at first, but people are making peace with those.
People are also not making peace with those. True. I'll be honest. When I see the self-checkout line that I could get through in 30 seconds and I see the line with the human that's a little bit longer, you know what I tend to go to? I often go to the line with the human.
Yeah.
If we're talking about diagnosing my diseases, I want a robot to do it because computers will do it better. And they will detect my cancer before a human was. But when it comes to sitting across the table from me and saying, I'm sorry, Leemon, you have cancer, I want a human. I don't want a robot to do that. Yeah. I want a human.
Yeah.
So let the robot do all the medical stuff. When it comes to operating on me, I want a robot. When it comes to talking to me about my upcoming operation, I want a human. Okay, do you understand what I'm saying?
Sides to jobs that robots will or can't replace.
And it's the part that talks to the human.
Yes.
I don't want ChatGPT to discuss with me my upcoming surgery. I want a human being. And then I want a reinforcement learning system robot to do the surgery.
The procedure.
Exactly.
Do you think jobs have to exist? I mean, we could
UBI.
Yeah.
Okay. Everyone talks about UBI. Maybe that's part of the solution. I don't know. There's downsides too. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, not at all.
That's always what people talk about, and it probably is. Maybe I don't know. I don't know.
Home, I don't do all the hard work. People get paid.
Okay.
Then it's almost like communism somehow, where people get paid.
Well, okay. Well,
state.
Except communism in some sense can't work, and this maybe UBI works. I think. And maybe something called UBI is part of the solution. I don't think it's the whole solution. The whole solution is that we crave doing things of significance. Yeah. So whether it's called a job and whether you're called being paid or not, it doesn't matter. And this is true of retirement too, especially with an aging population and longevity research. I want to do a first principles on longevity. We have to reach a point in your life where maybe you retire forever from paid work. But you can't just sit in front of the TV for the next 20 years. It will destroy you. Yeah. You have to do something of significance. It does not have to be paid work.
Meaning.
It has to be meaning. Maybe you are doing volunteer with people that are suffering, or maybe you're doing volunteer with children, or maybe you're doing volunteer with animals. You have to do something of significance. We as human beings will die if we just spend the rest of our life on the golf course. And I hate to say it, but it is the truth.
A lot of retired guys, it's almost a cliche. They retired from work, but the brain switches off and they're dead.
Now, another thing that science has shown over and over again is that we just need human connection. Even more important than doing something of meaning is doing something where I connect with human being.
Do you think the robots will get so good that falls away?
It's a real question. I think not, but it's a real question. It is possible that future versions of ChatGPT aren't even smart enough that they know what they're saying, and they aren't even smart enough that I would start to think that they're intelligent. But they're smart enough to keep you company, or at least keep some people company. But I also think that at some level we're eventually going to understand you're not real. My dog is real, but you're not real. And there may be a time when that happens.
Yeah, maybe we have to get over that. Yeah, you can.
Maybe they'll be as smart as my dog and they'll be just as good a companion, but I'm skeptical. We'll see. I don't know. It's actually, I really don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Something that's rare, by the way. Something that you said that really made me want to turn the cameras on is something that it's a misbelief that I had, which is I thought that AI can make AI smarter.
Oh, yeah.
And that isn't true, is it?
Not exactly. So it's true in a sense, but it's not really fundamentally true. So here's the thing that people say with the singularity.
Because that's what's scary. AI making AI smarter.
Well, I think it's pretty cool. But the nightmare scenario. So what people have said is that if AI is smarter than people, then what it will be able to do is make an AI that is smarter than itself, and then that one will make an AI that's smarter than itself, and then you get this cycle, and the cycle will go through 1,000,000 years of improvement in a night, and we'll wake up in the morning, and our super overlords have now taken over, and we're all pets.
We can't even comprehend what they're saying.
Right. Exactly. I won't say whether or not that scenario will ever happen, but the feedback cycle they're talking about isn't real. It is not the case that if you build an AI and I build an AI, whichever of us is smarter will have the better AI. That's not true. If whichever of us is a little bit smarter, that doesn't mean that the AI we built is a little bit better. In fact, the history of AI has lots of dead ends. The very smart people have spent long times finding the dead ends. The way we've really improved AI is that we've just tried lots of things and see what works. And so maybe what we're going to get is AIs improve fast because we just have a whole bunch of them being tried in parallel. But it's not necessarily the case that we're going to have the feedback cycle that this AI is smarter, therefore it's going to build one that's smarter than itself, therefore it's going to build one that's smarter than itself. Just being smarter doesn't make you build a better AI. And so we're not going to wake up one morning and find that they're now 1 trillion times faster than they were last night. It's going to be more of they have to work in parallel, and we just try a bunch in parallel, and the better ones work. But then we don't have a trillion computers doing it. So again, they don't become a trillion times better overnight. So that's not really how it works.
So
Yeah.
you can make AI very specific for very specific tasks. What if you give it the specific task of creating a better AI?
Define better. Okay. But also, how is it going to do it? Well, it has to use reinforcement learning. Well, it has to do trial and error, which means it has to try a lot of different ways, which means now we're back into the thing where it's exponentially hard to do. So the example I want to say is if you want to draw a straight line with a pencil, having a straighter pencil doesn't help.
Yeah.
A crooked pencil is just as good as a straight pencil for drawing a straight line. And so a smart AI is not any better than a stupid AI for building a better AI. And a smart human is not better than a stupid human for building a better AI. I mean, if you're too stupid, you can. But
yes, to a degree.
But you can draw a straight line with a crooked pencil, and making your pencil straighter doesn't make your line any straighter.
So okay, so how far can AI go then? Where could it?
There's the question. So the real answer is we don't know. And when I say we, I mean all of humanity. There are some things that I am convinced AI is going to get better at and is going to accomplish in the very near future. And there are some very basic things that I don't know. Maybe it will and maybe it won't. And I am skeptical of anyone who thinks they do know. So what do I think is really going to happen? I think you're going to find basically robots that get good at all the things that don't involve language. And I think they're going to get good at very, very fast. So we were talking about building houses and being on assembly lines and doing mining, and I think manning a factory. I think all of the staffing a factory. I think all of those things are going to happen really fast. That these robots that are self-learning are going to learn how to do these tasks. It is extremely complicated to put a screw in with a screwdriver, but they're going to learn how to do that. They're going to learn how to do it very fast. And the thing that AlphaZero, the reinforcement learning with deep neural networks, is just going to do all these things incredibly fast. And the dojo that Tesla built is going to make these things really fast. And they're going to get good incredibly fast. ChatGPT will get better, right? Generative AI for LLMs, these large language models, they're going to get better. And they're going to get better and go asymptotic to some amount of goodness. What is that level of goodness? I don't know, and neither does anyone else. There is a real sense in which ChatGPT 4 doesn't understand what it's saying. And people would say, well, there's some sense in which it does understand what it's saying, but there's also a real sense in which it doesn't understand what it's saying. So will ChatGPT 5 be able to do better? Will ChatGPT 100 then be 25 times better? I don't know. Maybe it's just fine-tuning rubbing off some of the rough spots and fine-tuning a little bit, and that's it. Or maybe it'll have some leap and it'll be a superhuman intelligence, but we don't know. It is very possible that to really get there, you need to have an internal state, and you need to have reinforcement learning, and you need to have it building models of the world in a sense that the current one is not doing. There are some breakthroughs that we may need, and I have lots of ideas if I were doing research on it right now that I would like to explore, and I don't know if they're going to work. We just have to try them. That's why I was saying being smart doesn't help. You just have to try lots of things and see what works.
Yeah.
So who knows? It's going to be fun to watch.
Leemon, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
This decade, we're going to see the rise of quantum computers, the resurrection of the woolly mammoth. We see blockchain reaching billions of people, probably artificial general intelligence, and fusion reactors are doing pretty good too. I mean, go figure. It's a strange world, man. The 20s have been very productive from technology. But where it gets interesting is not in the individual innovations, but rather the emergence of these innovations. So what does the rise of AI do for information security or software development? What does the rise of synthetic biology do for other adjacent industries, for example? And so what's cool is blockchain has always had a special role as it's the regulating function of exponential technologies. It's something that can co-evolve and grow, and it helps you sort out things like, could I build a decentralized large language model where all of the servers are decentralized instead of being owned by Microsoft or by OpenAI or by Grok? Or could I create an IP management system for synthetic biology where the intellectual property of the de-extincted species belongs to the commons in a blockchain as opposed to a single company? So that's what gets me most excited is the emergent properties of exponential technologies. And we focus mostly in that space these days. And it's extraordinary to see what's been happening.
Two trends. In addition to all the things you're talking about, and space advancing, and humanoid robots, and things we can't even imagine, CRISPR and other things doing cool things, and longevity. Anyway, two big trends. One is giving people more power over their own things, their own life. You are your own bank. You are your own identity manager. You are your own everything. That's one of the big trends, is to be able to give us more control of our own things, disintermediate, which just allows more things to flourish. I no longer have to worry about a middleman helping me for many things. I can directly transact. And the second thing is, in addition to us being able to control our own life, we need to be able to have more and more safety nets and things giving us the power to actually do it in a way that works well. And so I get control of my own identity, but I also have zero knowledge proofs that let me only show you the pieces that I want to show you, rather than show you my whole passport. I have pass keys letting me be able to log into websites without having to memorize passwords that could be lost. But I also have DREC backing them up for me. And the identity DREC can back them up for me. I think that we have the more and more, I am my own bank, but I also have control of my own bank. And we work out, well, how does that work with AML, KYC, safety things? We can make society be safe at the same time we're making me be safe and increasing both of them together. So I think more and more what we are seeing is that in this new world of a million different things out there, the trend, if we do it right, we have to do it right, the people in this room are making it right, is that we have to have more and more control of everything in your own life, not having to depend on some trusted third party, and more safety around that control.
I would be doing my viewers and a lot of people who are very, very interested in this a disservice if I didn't at least try, okay? So, price, HBAR price.
Yeah.
For me, as you guys know, I have a substantial property portfolio. I have the hotels. I have bullion. I have just purely as an asset class, purely as an investment. In my mind, it is not just the most undervalued asset in the industry. It's the most undervalued asset there is across the board. Full stop. Period, as they say in America. So. I guess my question is, first of all, do you guys, are you checking them? Like, do you ring each other and want to say, have you seen the price? Have you seen, we're at 30 cents? Or do you not even really, are you aware of the price?
Of course we did. No,
So you
we
do
are.
track it?
In fact, well, so Leemon and I text each other,
You
right?
text each other,
And
okay.
occasionally, very, very rarely,
Yeah.
it slips out into the public, right? I
Okay.
remember a tweet, I don't know, 6 months, 8 months ago,
Okay.
where I just tweeted 42.
At the very beginning of the video, you saw what looked like two atoms being fused together. And I said to myself, that looks very familiar. It looks like the Mastercard logo. As we know, the Mastercard logo looks as though it's a sun and another sun, sun setting. Some people say it's two suns, call it whatever you want. But as you see right here, as we replay this, very interesting to see the two be fused together, because for people like myself, it immediately reminded me of the Mastercard logo. I want to take you into a little bit more of what I have in my outline, and it's the notes. We see this conversation from Grok points out that the Mastercard in itself is a financial services company, and we know that, but it has a large portfolio of patents. In fact, over 10,000 filed globally and thousands granted. However, DLT, commonly associated with blockchain, is a modern concept that emerged prominently with, of course, Bitcoin back in 2009, but as a result, Mastercard's patents explicitly related to DLT or blockchain date from around 2017 onward, and it does align with the rise of these technologies in finance. While there's no Mastercard patents from 1988, what I'm going to show you here gets really interesting. So one thing I decided to look more into is these specific patents. You're more than welcome to look into them. It's about system methods and apparatuses for implementing smart flow contracts using what? DLT in a cloud-based computing environment. And of course, you see these particular dates, but in summary, what's interesting is basically the assignees. And like it says here, it describes a blockchain system for recording transactions in an immutable ledger using consensus protocols for validation, integrating smart contracts, but there is direct correlation to DLT core blockchain elements like distributed ledgers, cryptography for security, and shared transaction recording. There's another one here, which is US 100-260-82B2, if you want to nerd it out, but it does in fact involve the whole thing of blockchain transactions, asset identifiers, etc., right? So long ago, there was an establishment of these basic things. And what I want to take you into is establishing some more key findings when it comes to my research. And even if you go to the Wikipedia entry of Mastercard, there was this thing called interbank branding. It happened all the way back in 1966. Okay? Well, basically what's interesting is in 68, just 2 years after Mastercard was called these old names, you had what is referred to as the ICA and Eurocard. They started a strategic alliance which effectively allowed the ICA access to the European market and the Eurocard to be accepted on the ICA network. And it says here, the Access Card system from the United Kingdom joined the ICA Eurocard alliance back in 1972. Okay, so again, I want you guys to understand why we try to get into some of this stuff and a little bit more in regard to the notes. I found the timeline to be incredibly interesting. As you guys know, I do a lot of focus on Ripple and the concept of XRP being the new electronic special drawing rights, and of course the whole correlation of the IMF and the original special drawing rights dating back to the late 1960s. So I decided to ask if anything grok this conversation. I said 1968, ICA and Eurocard started the strategic alliance. And when this was happening, didn't the IMF also test the SDR? And they point out basically, yes, around the time of 1968, the ICA Eurocard alliance, the IMF was actively advancing toward creation and implementation of the special drawing rights. And of course, they give us the whole history of all that, which is fine. But basically in itself, like it says in 1968, IMF was in the final stages of preparing and ratifying negotiations in regard to early 1968 developments of member countries participating in the special drawing rights. Okay, if you're new to all this, check out my video section. I go really deep into multiple collaborations with a lot of people, right, as well as some of my own research, but the timelines do overlap closely, like it points out here. The card alliance happened in 1968 while the IMF was effectively finalizing testing the groundwork. Okay, so again, I want to establish that. And if anything, shout out to our brother in space again, Smoke, because on this particular one, I don't think I shared this before, but I do think it's important to recognize the connection and correlation when it comes to, quote, what is between petrodollar agreement and expiring in crypto-based ESDR. Again, that term, electronic special drawing rights. The petrodollar agreement was an antiquated reminder of a flawed monetary system. It was based on the United States dollar, developed after the establishment of a conventional SDR. Crypto is a response to these old flaws. So let's blow this up. And what you're going to see here is the highlights that Smoke has for us. So for one, we see here the nations and institutions who have been working on correcting these imbalances. I think I'll blow it up a little bit more for you guys so it's easier to read. So we see specifically the highlights, and it mentions, basically speaking, the expansion use of electronic special drawing rights, or in that case, actually just special drawing rights, right, of the IMF. Following the SDR was the development of OPEC and the petrodollar arrangement between Saudi Arabia and America to ensure all global energy sales were transacted in United States dollars. That is important. SWIFT system used cross-border payments and, of course, implemented it all, and we know the history about that. But what's also interesting is to see here where it points out what was happening in the world, at least at that time. It says these are all important monetary facts to understand because what is happening in the world now around crypto assets and cross-border payment improvements is a direct response to the inefficiencies and imbalances which have contributed to a one-sided distribution of wealth in the world. Bottom part references a little bit more of the SDR, and this is important. It says the SDR, being the best test case scenario at the time, was promoted, think about this, by the IMF, even the Bank of International Settlement, and even China. And it says as the dollar alternative. But the SDR needed almost a complete overhaul to make it liquid enough to meet global demands. Again, I know this is more of a Hedera video, but we're going to connect that. We are now experiencing a crypto renaissance as blockchain potential is being fully realized around the world. So I covered more than enough coverage when it comes to XRP and the ESDR. And of course, when we see this terminology when it comes to liquidity, I think of things like Ripple with on-demand liquidity. What's important to recognize is in the documents, there is actual numerous sources of the connection of the IMF and even Hedera. And I don't know if you've ever seen this before, but I want to share it with you. This is a 67-page document about the International Monetary Fund's digital tokens, a legal perspective. And basically, while it's a working paper that describes a lot of research, we want to pull this up not so much back into like the 1960s, but more importantly, what happened in 2023, because that's pretty close to where we're at now. We see here, basically speaking, these citations. We see here where they, as in the IMF, specifically point out how directed acyclic graphs, DAGs, do not require the creation of a chain of blocks. Instead, the ledger uses alternative cryptographic mechanisms to reach consensus. We know basically that Hedera is not a blockchain, it's a distributed ledger technology with the hashgraph consensus algorithm, the gossip protocol. But you see here that there's a whole thing of being, or I should say, excuse me, the whole want need to refer to past data, but does not require including all past information in a block. And it mentions best known examples are Hedera hashgraph. They specifically mention them. I do think it's important to establish that with IMF. And honorable mention to IOTA. I own IOTA as well. Feels it's very slept on. But both ledgers can be classified as DLT, but not as a blockchain. One of the primary advantages of DAGs or blockchains is that they can reduce the data size per transaction, which in lower costs and obviously have higher speed. It addresses the issue of scalability that affects, of course, blockchain. Another key document I want to jump into, actually before I get there, is to also cite this, another citation in regard to the glossary, as you saw there, they highlighted not just Hedera hashgraph, but what's more important is specifically their ticker as an HBAR. And a lot of times in these documents, they just mentioned the company name, but it's interesting to see that they specifically mentioned HBAR. Again, I wanted to highlight that. Now, what I want to do is I want to take you over to another IMF working document. This is Tokenization of Financial Market Inefficiencies. It's a 33-page document. And what you're also going to see here is also important. We see here on page 6 of 33, where they point out specifically the features of tokens or token ledgers, okay? They point out the prominent ones, and more importantly, it says here, basically speaking, again, right from the IMF, it says, similar to these studies, they note the discussion of distributed ledger technologies, the prominent technological implementation for tokenization, but not part of what defines a token. This stands in contrast to various other studies, including in the private sector, which tie distributed ledgers to the definition of what digital tokens. And it says, for example, there's others, but again, they highlight specifically the whole thing of Hedera. And what's also important is recognizing friction. You see tokenization, you see the whole sharedness, programmability, and trust. Again, like I shared you with basically Dr. Leemon Baird, where he was talking about some of that trust and basically talking about the third parties and again some of that programmability. You have frictions to it all, but basically it's through the asset lifestyle, issuance, exchange, redemption, and servicing, externalities, internalities, and market power. The effects of tokenization on financial market inefficiencies basically come from the improvements in the sharedness and programmability of such ledgers and the features, but whereas trust is necessary condition for their utilization. Again, you can have all the programmability in the world, but if nobody trusts this stuff, it's not going to be used. And again, interesting to see the IMF report in regard to this. Something else I want to pull up for you guys is basically straight from the concept of Mastercard and the IMF. In this, you'll see basically an excerpt that explicitly credits Mastercard's data and describes this as part of a new partnership that will leverage private sector data for economic research. So there is correlation, ladies and gentlemen, according to what I saw in my research of the IMF and even Mastercard. That's why I'm calling back full circle with this. You have here basically a 19-page document, e-commerce during, I get in trouble if I say that word out loud. YouTube is really weird when it comes to stuff like that. But basically, it's stylized facts from 47. And basically speaking, International Monetary Fund, e-commerce during, obviously, pandemic, stylized facts from 47 economies. What you're going to see specifically here as we jump down is the constant mentions in the abstract about how the IMF, again, working paper, described the research. And of course, what you also see, the study of e-commerce across 47 economies and 26 industries during the pandemic using aggregated and anonymized transaction level data from who? Mastercard. We know about Mastercard and Hedera. We know about Mastercard's integration with it all with the MTN. We know about Mastercard, Hedera, Mastercard Ripple, Mastercard Stellar, things of even Quant, you name it, right? But it's interesting to, again, see the key highlight with the research from the IMF because they have found that Mastercard's scale to represent total consumer spending and the share of online transactions in total consumption have increased in more economies with higher price pandemic e-commerce shares, exacerbating the digital divide across economies. They point out the whole thing of latest data, again, they want an emphasis on specifically like Mastercard. There's more citations about this, but basically from what I also understood, Harvard Business School collaborated with Mastercard and the IMF in it all. You're more than welcome to check out this document if you choose to do so. I would basically recommend looking into it if this is your type of thing, if you want to nerd it out. The other thing I want to point out is literally from the IMF blog. You see here specifically speaking, again, another references, to the pandemic, but you see here specifically speaking at that time, it said new research, a new partnership between who? Mastercard, the International Monetary Fund, aka the IMF, and Harvard Business School shows how private sector data can help advance empirical economics and will be the first in a series of such studies. Again, why basically highlight these in itself? Because again, the correlation to things even like Hedera, as I pointed out. You guys seen some of my other videos. Again, sometimes people don't like this. A lot of people do. So again, it is what it is. Can't please all the people all the time. Nobody can, right? But again, the point is recognizing some key things from geometry. So you've seen some of my XRP videos lately. Geometry does hold some weight. Again, it's basically the language of math, whether people like that or not. We see basically here this. cold fusion, as you saw what was mentioned at the very, very beginning in those intros. So again, it's interesting to see when it says cold fusion, immediately in Jewish gematria, you see the phoenix, okay, and you see the ripple effect, okay. That's important to basically reference some of that. And again, even some of these things like the secret name and whatnot. Call it a coincidence, call it whatever you want, but this is what's also interesting when we pull up more information about Hedera in gematria. Okay, so basically speaking, here's Hedera, and there's other values in Hebrew gematria, obviously English gematria, simple gematria. For this example, I want to share with you guys basically 41. And I know that you saw a little bit of 42, which I'll give you the answer here at the end. But I do find it really, really interesting that when it comes to specifically Hedera, you see 41 in simple gematria, and it matches Omega. And as you guys know, especially when it comes to Greek, right, there's alpha and omega, right? Alpha is the beginning, omega is the end, right? Well, when we talk about artificial intelligence, a lot of people feel as though that these are the end times and that AI will deliver the end times. I know that sounds scary in itself, but I do wanted to point out that according to gematria, it's really, really interesting to see the correlation of 41 and also omega 41. Again, is Hedera part of the mix of the end? Again, I try to be transparent with you guys, and I try to bring you guys some information to kind of think outside the box. And at the same time, I also recognize what Dr. Leemon Baird is sharing, that it's the balance of basically the good and the bad and so on. And whatever the case be, you've got to make a decision for yourself, what's best for you and your family and whatnot. Some people point out that all this stuff that we talk about is part of a beast system or whatever you want to refer to it as. But nonetheless, I thought I would point that out and share that with you guys, because even by definition, according to Merriam-Webster's, like I pointed out, something or someone designated with the name omega or the Greek letter denoting the last in position or class. For example, omega 3 refers to the position in a final double bond chemical structure. Again, why am I mentioning that? Again, back to the references that you saw at the very beginning of the man who exposed all this stuff, basically, what was it, in the late 80s? And he's talking about specifically what cold fusion, et cetera, et cetera. So again, interesting to see the terms match up, especially when it comes to like omega or omega 3, the position of the final double bond. So again, back to what you saw with the double bond, as in basically the fusion. You know, call it symbolic, call it whatever you want, but again, it's just, it really makes you open your eyes to some of this stuff. So double bond in a chemical structure, which 3 carbon atoms from the omega or tail end of the molecular chain. I think that's important. That part's highlighted right there. All right. Another thing I wanted to highlight, basically speaking, is bank, right? And you see also 42 in numerous documents and so on. We get examples of some things. I found one about the World Bank, and they have, for example, a typo in regard to BANNK, but it basically means the same thing as bank. It just kind of gets lost in translation. But again, interesting to see the whole thing of 42. So that's an outline. I thought I'd bring it to you guys. Do me a solid if you listen to the entire outline and simply type in to the comments 42, and it lets me know who's paying attention and who isn't. The saying goes, know what you have, know why you hold it. The research trumps FUD 110%. May the Lord Jesus bless you all. I truly mean that. We'll see you guys on the next video. Over and out.